Before we get started with the video, I wanted to give a shout out to my new channel. If you're into essay style videos with a little bit of a twist where we talk about the lore during a playthrough of a video game and the story behind the game, then check out my new channel, Stoned Lore. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description and in a pinned comment. Obviously, judging by the title, things get a little bit twisted when we divulge ourselves into the video games that way, so check it out if you're into that kind of thing. One of the first things I want to talk about before I get started into this rant about Starfield is my first impressions video. I've seen a few comments where people are like, you better go back and redo your first impressions or take that video down since the game is so mid. I don't think the game is mid. Like, I really enjoy Starfield. So that's something that I do want to say right at the beginning. I have talked to a lot of people that have felt the same way that I do currently, which is that first few weeks you have with the game and you're really exploring it and enjoying it. You have a really good time, and that kind of tapers off. You lose your interest a bit after that. But I mean, we're talking a couple of weeks here, so this is not like some kind of, crazy situation when it comes to a video game. But my first impressions still stand. When I first played Starfield, I really looked at it as a 10 out of 10 experience. There, of course, was a couple of bugs. There was things that, the AI not keeping up the way I'd like to see it during combat, things of that nature. But I enjoyed the game a 10 out of 10 amount. Now, the story happens to be the main quest. Again, this video will likely go into spoiler territory for the main story of Starfield. So if you don't want that, maybe don't watch this until you finish the main quest and kind of know what's going on. But the main quest of Starfield, when it comes to multiple universes and different things happening in those universes and like the unity, the things of that nature, that's super up my alley for like my sci-fi tropes that I enjoy. I really enjoy that specific type of science fiction, so I do feel a little bit biased that way. A lot of people said that due to Bethesda giving me the game early, I then had more bias because I got the game early. So I'm going to now speak about it nicer. Well, I can understand that point of view, and there is probably truth to that. I think anybody who gets a gift from a company like Bethesda or something like that of that magnitude, playing a game that big before release, you might be a little bit like kinder to the content, but I honestly really enjoyed my time with Starfield. By the time I made that first impressions video, I had played it for weeks and weeks. It was just a really good time. And yeah, so it's like, while I do see more of Starfield's flaws now that I've spent more time, I have hundreds of hours in the game now. I see more of its flaws. I go back to it and have that feeling of enjoying myself and enjoying going to different planets and moons and exploring things. I just get really sucked into that. So I still see the draw this game has, and I do want to talk about where I think it goes a little bit thin. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is that Bethesda has started to respond to negative Steam reviews. A lot of people have deep dived this entire scenario, so I'm not going to go through and read all of them or read these big brick responses that Bethesda has been replying to Steam reviews with. Some people have accused them of using AI to generate these responses. Others have noticed that depending on what the negative review said, the responses would use the same copy and pasted like response. Definitely worth a look if you have Steam and you're interested in it. Obviously, there's one on the screen, but it's just more what the fuck were they thinking behavior from Bethesda. But it's definitely something to look into for yourself. It's pretty much a case of I think this game is boring, and then them saying no, it's not, except in like 8 paragraphs. When it comes to my experience with Starfield, I still think that the story is some of the best that the Bethesda Game Studios has come up with, that Emil has written. When you look at Fallout 3, obviously I have like a big affinity towards Fallout, so I like that setting, I like the environment, I'm more likely to like the things that are put into that environment because it's Fallout. But with Starfield, it was like a clean slate. But like I said earlier in the video, this exact type of science fiction is like 100% what I'm into when it comes to the genre. Multiple universes, hints of time travel, just all that kind of stuff, all that kind of like out there shit. I'm very into that, and I think a lot of people are. But when it comes to my sci-fi niche, that's it right there. So I'm a little bit biased towards that. But with the fresh slate that Emil has with Bethesda Game Studios coming at this IP new, I really enjoyed the main story. I've seen some people say they didn't, but I think that's one of its strengths. I think the companions are very, very well done. I found myself caring about the ones that I kept around, and it's just I really enjoyed that when it came to the game. But what I think Starfield starts to like really thin out on is the world map itself, the playable game area, I should say, because saying world map in this game seems disingenuous, because there's so many worlds and so many maps. But when it comes to the playable game space of Starfield, I think Bethesda shot a bit too high, if that makes any sense. When it comes to a Bethesda game, when it comes to Fallout 3, Skyrim, Oblivion, Fallout 4, even Fallout 76, the game worlds are their own main character. The Mojave in Fallout New Vegas is its own main character. It's its own entity separate from the player. Now, you could argue that the Starfield universe also acts that way, and it does. But where I think it starts to get spread thin is when you have 1,000 planets and you have 120 star systems, and you use AI procedural generation. And honestly, when it comes to games, I think a lot of people are okay with the use of those tools. Look at No Man's Sky, who they absolutely just 100% changed their game for the better. Their fan base loved it. People became fans of the games as they were working on the titles, and they used the same kind of system. But something about a Bethesda game doing it makes the world seem more hollow. And like a lot of people, I really hate this analogy, but I do think it's a little apt when it comes to Starfield, which is wide as the ocean, deep as a puddle. Now, I don't think that every aspect of Starfield feels this way, but I do think that the playable game space suffers from that tremendously. When it comes to a Bethesda game, like I mentioned the ones before, like Skyrim, let's say, because I don't want to just hound on Fallout. We all know my opinion on Fallout. But when it comes to something like Skyrim, and you explore that world, you explore Skyrim for the first time, for the 10th time, for the 50th time, the 100th time, you always have that exploration bug. And now I do feel this in Starfield, but when you start to learn the location, like Skyrim, and you start to know the map, and you know where these things are, and you can go back and visit the things that just things of that nature. While again, this does exist in Starfield, it seems like a big missed opportunity to do maybe just a couple of star systems, maybe 10 to 20 planets that you can land on, and fleshing those out like Bethesda, typically does with their game worlds. When you have so much procedural generation out there, and like it does it good enough. It does it to the point where it's like you land on planets, and it doesn't seem like super out of place. I mean, No Man's Sky gets a bit wacky. It doesn't ever really enter those territories. I haven't been to every planet yet, but I've been to a lot of them. I've been to a lot of star systems, and I've seen how things change. And it honestly, I like the way it's done. But when you hit the 1,000th abandoned mine, or your 1,000th abandoned science outpost or mining outpost or colony, or you know what I mean, like these locations are also then procedurally generated, and I'm sure a few different types of them exist, and then they're copied and placed where they can be, where locations are like, okay, so with the old Fallout game, the older Fallout games like Fallout 3 is a very good example. When you're running around, you may hit a random encounter, and that could be a bunch of ghouls around a fridge, or some ants or a deathclaw, just something that could happen. Raiders, rad scorpions. A really good spot to check it out is in front of the Super Duper Mart when you're doing the Wasteland Survival Quest. If you go out in front of there's always some kind of random encounter that happens in front of that building. So you have that happening, but instead, and there is still random, and it's always like I step forward and then step back. There is still random encounters in the form of like ships landing in Starfield and things of that nature, but locations are almost treated like random encounters at this point, where it's like, oh, I guess an abandoned mining outpost can go here. And there are unique locations, few and far between. Once you've charted a planet or checked it out enough, you can see if something unique is there by an emblem that shows up on the planet on the map. So like that, these things exist. But a really good example of how it falls thin is Earth itself. So Earth is a big dust ball. Again, I said there'd be spoilers in this video, so I'll explain this because a lot of people who haven't played Starfield, you may be watching this video and you have no interest in playing Starfield. That way I can explain to you, because like when I made videos about Earth and Starfield, people were like, oh, it's like climate change activism and stuff like that. That's not what happens in Starfield for the Earth to become a dust ball. So NASA learns how to develop these grav drives that let you travel so fast between planets and star systems via the artifacts. I'm pretty sure I could be misquoting this because it's been a minute since I've ran through the main quest, and this is from memory here. But so they do the grav drive thing, and it's like, well, if you do that, the NASA scientists knew that if he did that, the atmosphere would slowly dissipate from Earth due to artifacts or something like that. Yeah, but anyway, not to spoil it all for you, because I don't quite remember every single hook in that. But regardless, that's along the lines of what happens to Earth. But when it comes to the landmarks on Earth, you wouldn't even know they were there unless you found the books that relate to them, which is fine. It's fine that there's books that'll point you in the right direction, but it would be even better if you went to go land on Earth and you landed in the right spot, which some people have claimed that you can land on the pixel perfect right spot to trigger those landmarks before you pick up a book or something like that. But I've never, ever in my life been able to have that happen. I tried it with the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy because that seems to be cut from the game. And I heard rumors that you could land in the Piedmont area and trigger the location for the Leaning Tower. I never got it to work. I had to go in and use console commands. So one of the things that bugs me is like, instead of these unique locations, like the lunar landing spot on the moon, the face on Mars, these things, instead of them just being locations that unlock on your map and it's like a cool point of interest and you can just go there to find them, a lot of the times you have to read a book or something like that for them to pop up, which kind of kills the exploration vibe, because if that's how they handled those unique landmarks, likely through side quests and other things of that nature, that's how you'll unlock other ones. So and that seems to be the case. So you might not even know that some locations exist, even if you fully charted a planet, just because you haven't triggered a side quest or a part of the main quest or a book or some item or a plaque that you may have read or something that could trigger these random events. Well, they're not random at that point, but trigger that script so that it will unlock that location for you. I find that disheartening on an exploration level because, like I said in previous games, you could learn the like lay of the land, and you could go and essentially in Starfield you can do the same thing. Each major planet's going to have some kind of like natural trait, and you can go and you scan those. I've noticed that I've gotten different traits on the same planets in different playthroughs. So like on Earth, I may have gotten a crater and something else, and then it's different when I go back during a different playthrough. Maybe it's not different. Maybe that's just the first ones I found and scanned, whatever the case may be. I don't know if that happens necessarily with flora and fauna, but it does change trait-wise. So it's strange because you won't be able to have the conversation. And again, that's kind of cool. Like you can talk to somebody and be like, oh, I did this in Starfield, and blah, blah, blah. And their experience could be completely different because of how the procedural generation works. But it also kills some of that Bethesda, like, love and care. And like it's interesting to note that there was like what I would call an exodus of Bethesda employees right after, like, it was in between Fallout 76 and the release of Starfield, but it wasn't so close to the release of Starfield that would, like, it seemed like when the main bit of their work was done on Starfield, a few notable Bethesda employees left after being there for decades. In some cases decades, in some cases not. But like there was still a handful of people. I don't want to misquote the number. I don't have the article pulled up. But I can think of a couple. Not going to name drop and call anybody out here because of the theory that I'm working with here. But when also we had heard that Starfield got delayed again, or at least the first time, or maybe only got delayed that one time. But when it got delayed, we had heard that the rumor going around the devs and the people that worked on the game inside Bethesda Game Studios were saying it was going to be, if they launched in the state that they had it when that launch window was open, that they would have been looking at a, quote, Cyberpunk 2. And what they meant by that was not that Cyberpunk is bad now. They've made tremendous upgrades to that game, but the launch was notably terrible to the point where PlayStation removed Cyberpunk from its store because it didn't think it was like up to the quality standards. They said that they were looking at like, you know, something like that. So I was rather surprised when I got the game early that there was such few bugs. Now I've encountered more bugs since they've updated it than I had on my beta, like quote, beta version before it was released. So it's interesting to me that whole aspect that people left and they were talking about, quote, Cyberpunk 2. And I wonder if there was an exodus of Bethesda employees because of how much they relied on AI procedural generation. Like I imagine these artists and coders and things of that nature have to sit down and create these objects, these textures for land, plants, animals, sky, the planet textures, all that other kind of stuff. But then I feel like Bethesda just kind of had them do that a couple of times and ran those through procedural generation, and that would be disheartening to me if I worked there. And again, this is speculation. I don't know anybody I know that had worked at Bethesda, because I do know a few people that have worked there. I know a couple of people that currently work there, and I talked to a few people in the gaming industry. Like, this is speculation. Nobody that works there would ever tell me if this was true, nor would anybody who had worked there throw Bethesda under the bus. They always speak very kindly of their past employer. You may think, oh, because they want more work or whatever, but a lot of them went independent and they still speak pretty highly behind closed doors when it comes to their time with Bethesda. So nobody's out there throwing them under the bus, but I wonder if that's the case, because you see this world get spread very thin when it comes to the things that I've mentioned here. So I feel like I've made my point that the procedural generation and like the kind of the scope of the game works against it. Again, these are tactics that Bethesda has used in smaller scales in their past games. It's just, it seems like the artists would go through and make locations look unique and add a bit more flavor to the areas. Anyway, to jump on just a couple of small things that I also kind of had a problem with is, I really don't see anybody talking about this one specifically, not being able to swim underwater. It was just taken from us from Bethesda games. I don't understand necessarily why. One of the reasons that somebody pitched to me was that, oh, because there's some planets that are just all like neon, like, well, the planet Neon's on, it's all an ocean besides Neon for the most part. So it's like you would have to like make that underwater world. But if they're procedurally generating everything anyway, why take that out? And there's also some really cool things when you take the camera and dive under the water. Sometimes you can see some cool shit. So it may have been in there before and they decided, hey, we're going to take this out. But it bugs me a little bit that you can't do that. It just doesn't, I don't know. Like, I remember when I first started playing it, I jumped in the water and I was like, what is this? Like, why? Anyway, again, it's not a super big deal. The game is massive and you're going up, not in the water. You're going up into space. So I can understand, but still, it's like, the other thing is like the lack of any like actual map when you're like on the surface, like any real surface map. It just kind of gives you the texture of the land, and then any locations that you've been to are highlighted with like a little white icon. The reason I think that is happening is because, again, you have so much procedural generation, they don't know which locations are going to show up in any given place unless it's one of the areas that they have fleshed out. So it's safer to do that like texture map as opposed to like giving you an actual top-down map. I don't know. That's my theory. Could be wrong on that, but that's my theory. But those are a couple of the things that I just was kind of like, like they just kind of grinded my gears a little bit. But mainly, my biggest complaint of the game is I do think that Bethesda may have spread it a bit thin when it comes to just the scale. The scale is so big, and I think that's what they were going for. They were going for like this massive, super giant scale experience, and they certainly delivered that, but I think it was at the cost of some of the charm that made their games so lovely in the past. Like I said, when you play through those past games, like their Fallout games and the Elder Scrolls series, I still get the same feelings when I'm playing Starfield that I did when I was playing those games, but the scope does work against it, I think, in a way. So that's really my Starfield rant. I want to thank you for listening to it. Again, if you're into this kind of content or you're into essay style videos and gameplay stuff, definitely check out Stoned Lore. People have been enjoying it, and I would love to have you over there. Boost up that subscriber count for people who want to see that kind of stuff. It would mean a lot to me. Anyways, I will catch you on the next one. It has been Mantis.